Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and we are heading into week 4, looking to close out the first month of the NFL season on a high note. Whether you're 0-3 or 3-0, it's still early enough that we should all be dialed in and ready to come through with a W this week. Hopefully, everything we go through today is going to help you get there. I have one of Kentucky's finest joining me today to break it all down, so let's get it. All right. I realized I said Kentucky's finest, but I think I may have shortchanged our guest today because he is not only one of Kentucky's finest, he is one of America's finest as well. A great friend, a much better host than I am from the IDP show, the incomparable Josh Raymer. Josh, how's it going, my friend?
I actually have that plaque on my wall, one of America's finest. So thank you for remembering that in the intro. I'll Venmo you the agreed upon $10 bribe there, John. Thank you. It's wonderful to be back on this program. One of my favorites. You're the best in IDP right now. Every week you kill yourself with that recap article that's like, I don't know how you do it. I think you collapse into a pile of sweat, blood, and tears at the end of each writing. So thank you for your service. We reference it every single week on the show. You're absolutely crushing it, dude, and I'm excited to be back on.
Oh, I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you referencing the article as well. Yeah, a lot of hard work goes into it, but I feel like I've gotten into a pretty good groove of putting it together each week. So that's really helped. I've gotten faster at doing it and pulling the data each week. But yeah, a lot of manual labor goes into that one, so I appreciate it. But yeah, I'm very excited to have you on as well. It's always a good time when we get to podcast together, and especially a nice long form podcast like this, where we're going to go game by game and hit on as much of the key IDP information that our little hearts can handle. I'll include references to tackles allowed and matchup data that you'll see on the YouTube as well. It's, again, still early in the season. That sample size isn't amazing, but the trends are definitely kind of emerging there. So I'll start to lean into that a little bit more going forward. And hey, if you're watching on the YouTube and you like IDP, you don't even have to like me. But if you like IDP, give the channel a thumbs up and a subscribe. That would mean a lot to me. Appreciate you all. I'll also have my IDP rankings article in the episode description. That'll be out Thursday morning. So I think this is going to go out Wednesday night. So it might not be in there right away, but I'll plug it in there once it's out. And then the link to the IDP fantasy report will be in there as well. I know it's under a paywall right now. I was of the belief that it was since week 1, but I guess we had an error there in engineering, I've been told, that allowed it to go for free for people's for weeks 1 and 2. So I very much apologize for the confusion on that one. It's one of those things, just not my call. If it was up to me, everything would be free, but then I'd also probably be free too, which isn't great for supporting my family. So, hey, if you want to help me support my family, subscribe to PFF Plus, and I promise you the IDP report will be worth it, along with the many other tools and articles on the site.
Yeah, support the pores.
That's
PFF,
right.
The IDP show.
Absolutely. We need all the help we can get, but that's enough of that, Josh. Let's get into it. And we'll start on Thursday Night Football between two teams who I don't know that they've ever played a primetime game against one another, to my knowledge. The
kind of
Dallas
obscure
Cowboys.
secondary market kind of teams, I feel like here.
Feels like, right? Yeah, new rivalries are brewing here in the NFL. Dallas Cowboys, New York Giants, Thursday Night Football. Where do you want to start with this game?
So I don't know how much you've been in the kind of IDP streets, whether it be Twitter, Reddit, message boards, John, but streets are talking that Micah Parsons is bad now, and we need to cash out on the name value. And so reading your weekly fantasy report, I wanted to bring this to your attention. Micah Parsons, bad, question mark?
I mean, that's definitely a take, right? And, it's the time of the year where, we're overreacting to small sample sizes. And I understand, like, he hasn't had a sack in 2 straight games, but that's what the defensive line position kind of is. Like, this is how it works, guys. He's an elite pass rusher, top 10 pass rush numbers across the board. He was on fire last week, and proved just how difficult sacks are to get, because he had a 90.7 pass rush grade, 33% win rate, which is insane, 26.7% pressure rate, again, it's so early in the season. Too many people feel like the need to kind of abandon ship on defensive players so quickly and kind of chase like unstable production, even like replacing them with guys that did have big games, like Patrick Jones, who we talked about. Like that's just like, he should not be in starting lineups, guys like that, right? Like Micah Parsons 100% needs to be in starting lineups. Defense, if guys don't perform well, it's not the same as offense. That I think that's the one thing we have to kind of get through our heads. Like for fantasy purposes, defense is a lot more reactive than offensive is. So if guys are, struggling, not doing anything on the offensive side of the ball, like some of that, a lot more of that has to do with them and underperforming, where defense, it's very, very different. So no, it's crazy. Micah Parsons still elite.
Yeah, it's like Adam said last night on our show. If Micah Parsons is bad, then everyone is bad.
Right.
Because no one is going to give you consistent 20-point output every week. That's just not. That's like, Christian McCaffrey, LaDainian Tomlinson, offensive 101 type of seasons, right? Like these guys are the outliers of outliers when you get that kind of consistency. So that just made me laugh. I mean, I think we've gotten very spoiled by Big Three scoring, our scoring system, which is a big play scoring setup. He has been DL2, DL3, and DL7 from 2021 to 2023. So I think we've just gotten very spoiled with how good Micah Parsons is, and we have forgotten how inconsistent and up and down, especially DL scoring can be. So you just have to be patient. The underlying metrics are phenomenal, like you said. Now I'm curious, Micah Parsons, not bad. We have established and concluded definitively he is not bad at football or a bad IDP asset. What do you think going over to the Giants DL? We've been having a lot of talk on our show about Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. They got a little bit of a reprieve because of the Cleveland Browns offensive line being such a hot mess in week 3 that even Azeez Ojulari got in on the action. So I'm not exactly like throwing my concern out the window after that performance because everyone got in on the action.
Sure.
What is your temperature right now on Burns and Thibodeau?
Yeah. So Brian Burns, like he's not like an amazing pass rusher by any means, but he's good, right? Like he's legitimately good. He has solid pass rush metrics. His playing time is all there. I think he's a fine start for IDP. Like I'm okay with him in kind of that more of that edge 2 range. Like I don't think he's really that top 12 type player that sometimes he's drafted as, where Kayvon Thibodeau, to me, I've talked about him a few times already, even in the off season, but already this season too, like there's just nothing there. Like his greatest asset is the snap volume for him, where he's been on the field a lot and he kind of produces by default, but based on those like snaps, he should be producing a lot more. And his pass rush metrics are terrible. They're among the worst in the league for the position. So he's not somebody that I feel like we have to start. He's a volume dependent play, and there's a ton of those guys. So yeah, Kayvon Thibodeau is not somebody that I'm starting. Brian Burns, I'm fine with starting in that kind of edge 2 range, but Thibodeau is well outside that range for me. I could pull up the exact ranking.
Yeah, that's how I feel right now. Is you look at a lot of leagues, we talk about this a lot on our show, start 2 defensive ends. That's 24 guys, right? That you're starting across a typical 12-team league every single week. And so there's a lot of these guys that are big, shiny names. We're going to talk about one a little later, Rashawn Gary. Kayvon Thibodeau kind of falls into that same mix of like, they're in this big fat middle of like 22 to 42. And it's like, I'm not saying these guys are every week starters at all. I think it's totally matchup dependent. So yeah, definitely opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm never sitting down Micah Parsons under any circumstances, unless he's banged up or something, and he may not play a full complement of snaps. But Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, I'm a lot more lukewarm on right now.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? I got Brian Burns' edge 20 this week. Like that's not even DL 20. It's just like specifically edge 20. And Thibodeau's like edge 50. He's right around like the Chase Young range for me.
Yep.
Like, and I bet if you looked at Chase Young's pass rush metrics and playing time, that playing time's probably comparable to Thibodeau, and pass rush metrics I bet are in favor of Chase Young, just without looking at it. So yeah, not interested there for the most of the Giants pass rushers. Dexter Lawrence definitely in DT required leagues. He's been amazing, but other than that, I I don't know that there's anybody of interest on that defensive line, including Ojulari. But other than that, for the Giants, like Micah McFadden, not a full-time player. Snap share was around 72% last week. So just kind of being aware of the volatile production. I know he's actually been really productive for IDP so far, but Bobby Okereke is the lone every down linebacker there. And then Andrew Phillips, or Drew Phillips, however he goes by, is out for Thursday. He's been the exciting slot corner for the Giants. He only played a couple of snaps last week before he was ruled out after that big week 2 game. So Cordell Flott is a fun name to say, and is his replacement in that role. So Dallas is like slightly above average at 11 personnel. So Cordell Flott should get some work, quite a bit of work in the slot, and actually played outside quite a bit last week as well. So I don't mind Cordell Flott. I just love saying his name. But
it's
yeah,
like Corn Elder, you know.
That's right.
Got some fun names to toss out there. Good for defense or IDP, yeah, but fun names though for sure.
That's for sure. Okay, so that is the Thursday night slate. We will move to the Sunday slate, but first, I just want to give a quick shout out to our friends at DraftKings. The best part of football season, checking out the post-game stats with which wideouts scored more than 2 touchdowns, which quarterbacks threw for less than 350 yards. Think you can pick who will do what before kickoff, then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. And for the first time Pick 6 players, and for all first-time Pick 6 players, there we go, new customers play $5 on your first Pick 6 set. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to play $5 on your first Pick 6 set. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. If help is available for problem gambling, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus age, and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits. Expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Man, a lot of tongue twisters in that one. All right.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. Let's go to the Sunday slate now. Los Angeles Rams at the Chicago Bears. And I guess just quickly starting with the Rams, there's not like a ton to go into here. We've covered Quentin Lake to death. He's definitely the better IDP option than Cameron Curl at this point, getting the better alignment as well. But the Rams front 7, Troy Reeder, Christian Roseboom, those are your linebackers. Reeder, definitely the guy that I'd be starting over Roseboom. He's playing the full-time role. Roseboom is not, so he might be a little bit more Roseboom or bust. Jared Verse is definitely somebody that I'm interested in. He's another one of those guys in that top 24 edges for me. 22.8% win rate on the year. That's 6th best at the position. It's even better than his teammate Byron Young, who had a nice breakout season as a rookie last year. He's sitting at 12.1% for the season, and not a bad matchup going against Caleb Williams, who's been taking a lot of sacks this year, even though their O-line has been pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to say, this was a game where the Colts edge rushers finally were able to get it together. It's been very frustrating as a Colts fan watching this team have pressure, get into the backfield, and then the quarterback just becomes like a slippery eel who gets away, and we cannot finish sacks. And Caleb Williams still thinking he's back at USC, you know, playing against future UPS truck drivers and office workers scrambling around in the backfield, it doesn't work like that in the NFL, bud. So he is taking quite a few sacks, and I do like the matchup. Verse has been outstanding. We kind of speculated based on the opportunity that Byron Young got last year that the Rams taking Verse in the first round with their first round pick in like a decade or something insane, that Verse was going to see a ton of volume, especially with the departure of Aaron Donald. How do you replace the GOAT defensive tackle? You don't, but you just throw a lot of bodies at the problem, and that's what they've been doing. So we speculated that Verse would be the most productive edge of this rookie class just because of the opportunity he was going to get, and we're seeing that so far. So love what I've seen out of Verse. Let me ask you this on the other side, John. Is it still TJ Edwards and then Tremaine Edmonds for you? Because Edmonds has looked pretty good to start the year.
Yeah, yeah, it's still TJ Edwards for me. I this literally came like I think it was it might have been just week 1 or something like that where like Edwards was um yeah, TJ Edwards was just so much more effective than Tremaine Edmonds and just did kind of a side by side comparison of the two and kind of pointed out like this has been the norm for these two for their entire Bears stint last season as well. And then literally the next 2 weeks, it's been Tremaine Edmonds. So yeah, I'm happy to have jinxed Tremaine Edmonds there or reverse jinxed him and he's performing well. But still, I think TJ Edwards, across an entire season is going to be the better option. We've got a pretty large sample size of both of these guys now and what they can do. So still feeling pretty high about TJ Edwards and Jermaine Edmonds. Definitely a fine start as well. He's playing 100% of snaps. There's no reason to kind of be shying away from him or anything like that.
But according to my notes, John, Tremaine Edmonds is still 19 and a half years old. So still room to grow into his role and into his body as a young man.
True. That's true. Very young. Yes, he was drafted. Yeah, he came into the NFL like an NHL player, basically. He was 16 years old and
yes, just learned to drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then the only other thing for the Bears side of things that I wanted to touch on really quickly was Kyler Gordon for those CB required leagues. So Kyler Gordon, I have him in CB 15 this week. I know he hasn't been amazing. Like he has been coming off the field quite a bit as a primary like nickel and slot defender, but he does draw a pretty good matchup this week to be a startable IDP in those CB required leagues. Like the Los Angeles Rams have yielded the 9th most tackles per game to the cornerback position, and they play in 11 personnel more than any team in the league at 85.7%, which is going to keep a nickel corner like Kyler Gordon on the field for the large majority of snaps. So feel like it's a nice spot for him to kind of produce and get right. It won't be like that every week, depending on the matchup, but I do like him still this week. All right, let's go to New Orleans and Atlanta. Josh, where would you like to start with these two teams?
So Carl Granderson, very popular fade candidate this offseason, just because, we hadn't really seen it before his breakout season last year, but off to a really strong start in his 2024 campaign. A little bit quiet week 1, just 3 tackles, but the last 2 weeks, 5 tackles, both weeks against Dallas and Philadelphia. Sack and a half in both of those games and a forced fumble. Where are you on Carl Granderson right now? Because it feels like he's kind of living up to the billing, the standard he set for himself last season.
Yeah, definitely. He was, and I'm with you. That he was an overachiever last season for sure. Right? Probably, outproduced what his numbers would tell you that he should have. But he's been good this year. I think he's actually been a little bit better. So he draws a decent matchup this week. It's going to be against either a banged up right tackle, Caleb McGarry, who has a 56.9 pass blocking grade on the year, or his backup, Storm Norton, who has a 54.6 pass blocking grade on the year. So if McGarry can't go this week, after being ruled out, like there's definitely a even better of a matchup for Granderson. He's been good though. 79.6 pass rush grade this season, 21.6% win rate. Like you said, coming off back-to-back weeks with a sack and a half. And Kirk Cousins has been pretty good at avoiding sacks. One of the better quarterbacks in the league, but I do like the matchup for Granderson. And at least, because of his playing time, he has a stronger production floor as well. I think, more than most edge defenders, I'd say he's delivered, I think, no fewer than 6 tackles in each of the past 3 weeks as well. So that's been promising to see. So I like Granderson quite a bit. I think I have him inside the top 10 this week.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that Atlanta offensive line lost them that game against the Chiefs. I mean, Leo Chenal dog walking that offensive lineman back into the running back on that 4th down play. That play had no chance to succeed with how banged up that offensive line was. I mean, credit to them for even making it close there at the end because that was just a disaster. So if we get Storm Norton again, I think Granderson's going to be storming the backfield against the Falcons. So on the linebacker side, though, for the Falcons, last time I was on the show, we talked about Landman. And I joked that this was the human alter ego of Ocean Man. So what a beautiful full circle moment for us, John, to come back to Ocean Man, Landman. And I hate that it comes at his expense because my dude did a lot with a little, right? Yeah. Made the most of his opportunity. So I hate that he's banged up. I hate that he's out. But it is nice to see Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis getting all of the linebacker snaps for the Falcons, just as God intended. I mean, Troy Anderson, that beautiful 10 RAS freak of nature athlete. We finally might get to see it. My question for you, John, if we get the Troy Anderson experience that we're all hoping for, if he takes this job and runs with it, does Landman slot back into this sort of like early down role once he's healthy, or does Anderson just hold on to the job from here forward with Caden Ellis?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Anderson's looked pretty good. I haven't really looked at his grades or anything like that, but just watching him on the field, he moves well. He's got some speed there. I think they probably will like him in this role. And look, I mean, Nate Landman, he, again, like you said, he was serviceable last year. I completely forgot about the Ocean Man alter ego thing. I'm glad you reminded me of that. But like, this isn't somebody that necessarily, has the draft capital behind him or anything like that, that you're so invested in him that you have to get him on the field. Where Troy Anderson, I mean, I know it's a new coaching staff and all that. This was a guy that they spent a second round pick on a couple of years ago now. So there's reason to, believe in him as a long-term asset here. And I really like his spot in this defense right now. Like with Jimmy Lake and Raheem Morris coming over, they've been one of the most zone heavy defenses in the league as well, which something that I've kind of harped on all offseason is that does yield better tackle efficiency for our linebackers as well. So Troy Anderson, even Caden Ellis, they're in nice spots here to produce. And I like both of those guys kind of going forward. And yeah, not overly concerned about Landman. I'll be, tempering expectations when he's off IR, but imagine that Troy Anderson will continue to play the large majority of snaps there.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where maybe you sit Anderson down when Landman comes off IR because we just don't know. And it could go back to what it was early in the season. But this is the opportunity that we've waited for Anderson for a long time. And linebacker's a hard position to learn. We've seen a lot of guys who we're going to talk about one a little later in Zach Bond, that sometimes it just takes the right opportunity, the right situation. You have a new coaching staff coming over. Anderson's finally healthy. Now Landman's out of the way. So for IDP, I think it's wheels up for both of these guys. And I'm just finally excited to see Anderson in this full-time role that we've wanted for him for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's in a nice spot there, and I'm definitely going to be. I think he's inside my top 20 even this week. I just like the matchup. Saints giving up the 5th most tackles right now to the linebacker position. Like I said, zone heavy defense. He's the one that's blitzing less than Caden Ellis, so he's in a better spot to produce tackles as well. So really like Troy Anderson here, especially this week. All right, let's head to some breaking news. Literally just before we came on, we got the news that Alex Kingleton has torn his ACL and is out for the season. This is brutal because Kingleton was again on just a ridiculous tackle pace. He had a 17.5% tackle rate last week, 16.7% for the year. Again, the average for the position is 13.3%. Just continues to be one of the most efficient linebackers. And this is in one of the more man-heavy defenses as well in Denver. I think they're ranked second in man coverages this season. And now that he's out, it leaves kind of a pile of crap in the middle of their defense because Cody Barton, they've clearly not been a fan of him. They've limited his snaps pretty significantly, like 53% of snaps last week. In week 1, he was splitting time with Christian Welch, who literally nobody's ever heard of. So he wasn't even close to, he was LB2, but he wasn't, far and away the LB2. Christian Welch was cutting into those snaps. I imagine that, because there's still only a couple days before the games, that Cody Barton will probably play close to full time this week, and Christian Welch will be kind of LB2. But I know they brought in Quan Alexander for a workout as well. I don't know that he's going to immediately step into game shape or anything like that right away. So I think for this week, if you're desperate, you play Cody Barton. But man, I don't have faith in him long term. How are you feeling about this situation?
You mentioned a pile of crap. When you got Cody Farton starting Barton and the heir to the Welch's grape juice fortune.
That's right.
And the reanimated corpse of Quan Alexander. I mean, he is the character from Hocus Pocus who comes up out of the grave and the moth flies out of his mouth. I mean, that's how long Quan Alexander's been dead. Let's just let this guy rest in peace, y'all. Like Shaq Leonard, you didn't want to give Shaq Leonard a call over Quan Alexander. Not that that's much of a better option, but sheesh.
Right.
Yeah, this is just one of those situations. We've talked about a few of them on the show this year that, like, I don't know that I want to figure out this situation. Yeah, I guess if you're desperate, Cody Barton, because what else is there for this week? But in terms of long-term outlook, yeah, I'm not going to be overly reliant on anyone in Denver. And we got to pour one out for my DraftKings bet for the tackle leader for the season, Alex Kingleton. I think I had him at like plus 900. So nice little bet there, up in flames. Just a bad situation all the way around, man.
Yeah, it sucks. So yeah, I mean, if you're desperate, you could put in Barton this week, but for the most part, I'm trying to avoid this situation because I know the team doesn't trust Barton. We'll see how kind of the snaps shake out on Sunday. Other than that, I mean, it's not a great matchup for the Denver safeties either. I know Brendan Jones had a nice week last week with the interception. I think he had a fumble recovery in there as well. But for whatever reason, still coming off the field for a handful of snaps. No idea what's going on there. But the Jets are giving up the 25th or 30th most tackles to the position. So not like a must starts for either of those guys. On the Jets side of things, Will McDonald has been excellent. He's now a top 10 edge in our IDP scoring here. I have him, obviously outside of that range this week. I don't think he's necessarily a top 10 option going forward, but the pass rush upside continues to be there. 5 sacks in 2 games. There's no Jermaine Johnson, no Hassan Reddick. It's essentially Will McDonald and Quinnen Williams on that defensive line. So, I mean, if you're desperate, you might want to take a shot on Attack McKinley as well, which is really gross. But that being said, this matchup specifically, Bo Nix has really done an excellent job so far avoiding sacks. That was something that he did really well coming out of Oregon too. And it's translated this far to the NFL. So I don't necessarily love the matchup for Will McDonald, but he's the hot hand right now. He might be hard to sit at this point.
Yeah, that was my question for you. Sitting as DL3 right now by Big 3 scoring after 2 monster weeks, quiet in week 1, but absolutely blew up the last 2 weeks. We were debating last night who inside the top 10 falls out, who rises up, and I don't think he's going to stay inside like the top 5 or something crazy, but he's worked himself into like every week's starting consideration at this point, right?
It's definitely possible, right? Like, I think he is kind of a more matchup dependent player just because like there's the pass rush upside, but I don't necessarily believe in him yet, like as an early down, like tackle floor kind of guy, like not overly effective against the run or able to put up, strong tackle numbers. So I think like if the pass rush matchup is there for him, then I would definitely be starting him. But I'd expect, again, the same kind of volatility we do for every pass rusher. I just think maybe more of a concerning floor, I guess, for somebody like Will McDonald.
Yeah, he's in that kind of streaming DL mix, I feel like. Yeah. And I'd say he's one of the higher options just because who else is there? I mean, this team we mentioned, well, if Reddick doesn't show up, then that gives McDonald a chance opposite of Jermaine Johnson. Now with Johnson out with the Achilles, it's like, and Reddick's still off in Japan cosplaying. I mean, it's Will McDonald season. And so I think for that reason, it's like he's higher in my kind of consideration. If I'm looking at most of my leagues, I feel like I've got one locked and loaded starter at defensive end, and then I'm kind of playing the matchup game with the other one. And he's in kind of that bunch of kind of edge rushers where it's like he's like with the Van Ginkels as far as like higher up in the pecking order of like, these guys are the first ones I'm looking at to see, should I plug these guys in?
Yep. I think that's a perfect way to kind of treat him for sure going forward here. Other than that, for the Jets, CJ Mosley, I think is going to be back. It seems like he was close last week and it was a short week too. So logic would dictate that he's probably back this week. So I know we were relying on Jamie and Sherwood in a full-time role, but I think, Mosley will be back this week, which is nice to see. And that'll bump Sherwood out of our depth charts here. Other than that, also kind of like the matchup for the Jets DBs, Denver giving up the 4th most tackles per game to the safety position. And the 6th most to cornerbacks as well. So DJ Reed, I really like this week. Chuck Clark definitely is another guy that's performed well this season. I got him as like safety 18 right now, and Tony Adams in a little bit of deeper league. So not bad matchup for the Jets DBs.
Yeah, the return of Chuck Clark, Cut Clark, Cut
Cut
Clark,
Clark, yeah, right.
back in our lives once again, and then Tony Adams. Love to see that for a New York team as well.
Yep,
Just a great collection of
good
safeties the
mix.
Jets are rolling out there. Love
That's for
this.
sure. That's for sure. All right, let's go to Jacksonville and Houston now, Josh. Where do you want to start with, Jacksonville or Houston?
What do we do with Foye, John? The He was trending down even before the injury with this linebacker rotation. I was mad at you because you were making this seem like a big deal, and I was like, no, John, it's not a big deal. It's just a 1 week thing. Then week 2 happens, and I'm like, oh no, what's happening? Then it keeps happening in week 3. He goes out with the foot injury. It's plantar fasciitis, which I have had before. It is agonizing. I wish him a speedy recovery. That is not a fun injury to have. So there's that. He's 29 years old. Then again, this Jag team sucks. What they're doing is not working. The coaches may all get canned. So it's like, is Foye a buy, a sell, or a hold right now for us in IDP?
Yeah, it's a good question. Last week, he was 100% a sell for me. Like, he was somebody that I was trying to shop around. Nobody accepts trades from me. And,
We know better. You do this full time. It's like, what does John know that I don't? It's just an auto decline.
Yeah, it's really annoying. So yeah, that didn't work out for me. So I've been stuck with him where I've had him. Luckily, I don't have him in a ton of spots. But it was definitely a sell last week. It might be harder to sell him this week, obviously, with the injury. You're selling him basically at his low. So you probably hold for now, and hope that he's able to be productive on 80% of snaps. But I don't think he's going to be in that top 12 conversation for this season, even in a points per game perspective here, because of the snap share. It's just not good. It's a complete mess. I think, if you're holding, the best you can hope for is that because this Jacksonville team and their defense specifically is so bad, that maybe Ryan Nielsen gets fired and they could get rid of this rotation, because it makes no sense. I mean, it's a complete mess. To take like a first round pick in Devin Lloyd, to take a Foye Oluokun off the field in favor of Chad Muma, who was one of the worst graded linebackers in the league for us last season, and Ventrell Miller, who I believe is a rookie, almost no NFL experience. Like, there's just not a lot of logic to it. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So it's not surprising that their defense is bad when that is kind of the rotation that they're deploying. So even for Devin Lloyd this week, I know Foyer's out and he's probably going to be out for a couple games, but I'm not like treating Devin Lloyd as an automatic start or a must add for waiver wire options either, because he's probably going to be in that 80 to 85% league as well. It doesn't matter who their options are, it seems, as far as getting players on the field and creating a rotation. There was their fifth linebacker that was getting into the mix last week as well. Was it Yasser Abdullah? I don't know. Maybe that's the rookie I'm thinking of, but it's a mess.
Yeah. It's a mess. It's sort of like Denver for me, where it's like, no, I'd rather someone else try to figure that out. And I do think Foye is a hold right now, because you're selling low, selling dirt, below the floor because of the injury right now, pennies on the dollar. So I'd rather just hold him. We did say maybe Ryan Nielsen learned at the feet of Arthur Smith last year in Atlanta how to aggravate fantasy managers. And he said, well, what if I'm like you, but on the defensive side?
Right.
And so there's obviously some evil there that's going on between those two. I don't like it. But yeah, I'm not necessarily ascribing Devin Lloyd a full-time role. We'll see. It's just a big old question mark. And those are the kind of things that I want to stay away from whenever I'm setting my lineup. So I'll let someone else sort out this Jaguars situation. I'm going to hope for brighter days ahead for Foye. He's one of like the 3 or 4 linebackers that I feel relatively good about, like long-term in Dynasty. So I'm hoping this is just a blip on the radar. We can get this Ryan Nielsen character out of here and put a coach in that doesn't take his best players off the field. That I don't know. That's just me. I'm not an NFL coach, but that seems like a better strategy.
Yeah, I know. I hear you, man. Oftentimes, the NFL coaches are the experts and stuff, but sometimes, even just watching from the sidelines, I feel like we can sometimes make better decisions, and that's definitely one that kind of stands out. So
yeah, just Foye. Do you want to be on the field for Okay, you're going to be on the field. That sounds good to me. I'm not going to overthink this.
Yeah, it's interesting, that's for sure. So yeah, other than that, and the Texans aren't a great matchup for linebacker tackles either. They rank 24th in that regard. So They are a better matchup for safeties. For like the Antonio Johnsons or Andre Siscos of the world, I probably prefer Johnson. He's the one getting the more of the work in the slot and the box. But let's talk about the Texans here for a second, because Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, I'm still treating these guys as top tier edge assets. I know a lot of people are getting a little bit frustrated with them, especially Danielle Hunter. How are you feeling about the Texans edges right now?
I got to watch them against the Colts week 1. I got to watch them in the primetime matchup against the Bears, and they eviscerated these offensive lines. I think I have the math here. They pressured Caleb Williams on 168% of his dropbacks. I don't know if that's right. We'll have to double check that in post, but they are absolutely eviscerating offensive lines. It's coming. Just be patient. Yeah. They've already, put up some solid performances thus far. Again, this is the week-to-week volatility we're talking about with the defensive line position. These guys, if you watch the games, are all over the quarterbacks. It's just a matter of time before they start stacking some multi-sack games. And so I'm with you. I'm absolutely going to be patient with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. They strike me as the types that, because this Houston team is going to be pushing for the playoffs down the stretch, weeks like 12 through the end of the end of the fantasy season, when it counts in the fantasy playoffs, could be unleashing hell on quarterbacks and stacking up multi-sack games. So if somebody in your league is being impatient and wants to offload these guys, snatch them up, because I can't think of many better assets along the defensive line than Anderson and Danielle Hunter right now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I am treating them both as top 12 edges for me, especially this week too. I mean, we talked about the Jaguars defense being a mess. Their offense is in just as bad of a spot, arguably, at this point. Like, they're the 6th worst pass blocking unit in the league. Trevor Lawrence has been taking a lot of sacks as well. Like, there's a lot to like about these two. I mean, I know Will Anderson, like, his pass rush metrics haven't been like amazing, but he's playing a ton. He's getting pressure. He has Danielle Hunter, who also is a great creator for him. Like, it's a nice matchup as well this week. So I'm going to be definitely still in on these guys and holding there. So the only other note really that I had for the Texans was just going to ask you, what do you think of the nickname H2O for Henry To'o?
I mean, I don't hate it, because whenever Adam says Henry T's name on our podcast, I have to reset his brain like the paperclip into the back of the router. So H2O, I'm here for it. Let's get that movement going, John. I'm with it.
All right. Yeah, sweet. Yeah, I've been calling him Hanky Two Toes for a while, just because he reminded me of Frankie Two Times from Goodfellas. I'm gonna go get the papers. But I think H2O kind of works. But that being said, it's not a great matchup for the Houston linebackers going against the Jaguars. That offense just hasn't been competent enough to do anything for the back seven, really. So and H2O there, he's not a full-time player. So prefer.
Okay, I take it back. You threw it out right there, and it just struck me wrong. All right. Yeah, it reminds me of the horrible Halloween movie. But it's like, it got put out there, whether or not we wanted it to be out there. So maybe H2O is perfect. I'm back in. All right, go ahead. Okay. Sorry. I just had to talk myself through it.
Fair enough. Yeah, it'll come and go. We'll see if it sticks. But other than that, not a whole lot on the Texans. I mean, Jalen Petrie has basically moved to he's not even a safety anymore. He's basically made the full shift to the slot this year. Last week, 45% of the slot, 47% in the box, just one deep snap. So yes, please, on that Jalen Petrie usage, definitely somebody that we could start.
Yes, and love seeing Azeez Al-Shaair sitting as linebacker 6 for us right now by Big Three scoring. One of the guys we were most excited about. Talked him up all off season. Folks were worried after a quieter week 1, but he has absolutely exploded onto the scene the last 2 weeks. 8.75 points for us in week 1, 22.5 and 20 points in week 3. So love to see. We have these linebacker darlings in the offseason. We're going to talk about quite a few of them on this show. Azeez Al-Shaair was definitely one of them, and it's just awesome to see him living up to the billing that we gave him.
Yeah, very excited about him. He was my dark horse pick to finish as LB1 this season. So hoping he can keep it going here. Because I like him quite a bit. All right, next game up is the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts. So the big news to kind of start with here has to be Alex Highsmith, who is going to be out 2 to 3 weeks with a groin injury. Really liked Highsmith. Speaking of, dark horse number one picks, he was my dark horse edge one pick. That doesn't look like it'll happen now because he's going to miss some time here. But stepping right into his place, Nick Herbig, who I know you guys have talked, or him big, as Adam was calling him when he was on the show here. Herbig, I like quite a bit as well. And the Steelers have a tendency to deploy like workhorses at the edge position. And we saw that immediately last week when Highsmith went out, because he went out at the end of the first half. And in the second half, Nick Herbig played 100% of the defensive snaps to close out that game. So I imagine he's going to be playing a pretty hefty role again this week. His pass rush metrics obviously were amazing. It's a tougher matchup against the Colts offensive line. As you know, that's one of the better offensive lines in the league. Anthony Richardson has also done a nice job kind of avoiding sacks. So it might be, a more difficult matchup, but it's going to be, I think, hard to sit somebody like a Nick Herbig where you pick him up. And I mean, obviously TJ Watt as well, but Herbig, like I have him as edge 21 this week. I kind of like him even in a tougher matchup.
We talked about it last night, what kind of opportunity Himbig was going to get, and would you be rolling him out there and start 2 defensive end leagues? And I think the answer is yes, because he is the quintessential player that will go off for 3 sacks on your bench if you sit him down. So don't play scared. Scared money don't make money.
That's right.
And anytime this guy has gotten on the field, he has been explosive. And I think if you're the Highsmith manager, you got to be a little bit worried, because if Himbig comes in and does what we think he can do, I think the floor of snaps for him moving forward, even with Highsmith back in the mix, is going to be raised. I think you're going to have a hard time keeping this guy off the field, because he just feels like another one of these guys, right? The Steelers just do this consistently, where they go grab these edge rushers that aren't necessarily the sexiest, flashiest guys, but the production and the track record with TJ Watt, Highsmith, now Nick Herbig. I mean, I think this is one of the bigger storylines for IDP thus far in this early season, is the opportunity that Herbig is going to get on a 3-0 Steelers team, a defense that, like, a lot of smart people are calling one of the best defenses in the league. So I know Brett Coleman said it's the best Steelers defense, I think, since 2008. Which is, I think, maybe the year they won the Super Bowl. So I'm excited about the opportunity. That defensive line is sick. I hope Highsmith comes back. We wish him a speedy recovery. But in the meantime, man, fire up Herbig and let's see what we got.
Yeah, he's definitely he was one of the top waiver wire targets for me this week. And yeah, definitely optimistic about his potential here going forward. Somebody that I'm not overly optimistic about on that Steelers defense is Patrick Queen. I know, he's been a full-time starter through the first 3 weeks as expected. However, up until last week, he had been a very inefficient tackler, which has been common for him in his NFL career. That's just who he's been. But they also played against the Chargers last week, who are tied for the second most tackles per game yielded to the linebacker position. But this week faces off against the Colts, who rank dead last in that regard. So thinking that potentially Patrick Queen kind of comes back down below that double-digit tackle range again this week. So somebody that I'm not as excited about here. I haven't been excited about him coming into the season, and he's only kind of lived up to that billing, basically.
Lived down to that billing.
Down.
He's been not great, and I think the Colts are really struggling to sustain drives, and so I would be sitting Patrick Queen down this week. I don't think you can roll this guy out. Unless you're in like a 4 linebacker kind of league. Right. I mean, would you rather roll out Queen or like Cody Barton this week?
I think I have Queen like 3 spots ahead of Barton, if I remember. I think I had Barton at LB 39 and I have Queen as LB 36. So
there you go. Right on that borderline though, right?
That's where they are. Yeah, that's kind of
I think you really have to consider it. Hopefully you have better options, because Queen has been uber disappointing, and this is a very bad matchup. I can tell you as the Colts fan, this team is not good right now. Their time of possession, they were dead last, I think, in the NFL going into that Bears game. So that was a fun stat to hear on the broadcast.
Yeah, nice. Well, speaking of your Colts, Josh, where do you want to start with these? Do you want to start with the bad being the injuries, or the good, the prize pieces like Nick Cross it being the good. Where would you like to talk about?
Let's start with the good, because we're optimistic, happy people. And we talked last night, EJ Speed, Zaire Franklin getting outrageous volume. 4 linebackers in the NFL playing north of 200 snaps. They're 2 of the 4. And so outrageous floor afforded by this volume. I don't think that's going to sustain. I think that's going to regress to, like, I don't think we're going to be a top 12 offense, but we're not going to be like bottom 3 or 4 in terms of like offensive efficiency and sustaining drives. I think we'll settle somewhere in like the back of the pack, like somewhere in the 20s. So I don't know that this floor is going to stay there even when it regresses. If it does regress, which I think it will, I think EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin will both be fine because we've seen them do this. Nick Cross is the one I'm wondering about. What happens if this offense becomes more efficient? We don't have this outrageous volume. Is he still like a safety 1 based on where he's being deployed, based on the scheme? Maybe. I don't know. What's kind of your read on the Nick Cross situation if and when the snap volume returns to some kind of normal level?
Yeah, so that was a player that I was definitely kind of like tempering after week 1, just because he was playing in more of the deep safety role in Gus Bradley's defense. But Julian Blackmon was missed week 2, so Cross played in the box. Week 3, Blackmon came back and Cross stayed in that box heavy role. So I thought that was really encouraging, at least for his kind of long-term value for this season, just to be in that role. We know how productive that spot can be for safeties in IDP because Gus Bradley deploys such a high safety rate. So Cross playing in the box and already being among the most efficient tacklers at the position. He's a 15.5% tackle rate so far this season, which is insane for a safety, and it's not sustainable, but being in the box for that high of a rate as well, like that's going to really help his case to continue to be consistent and productive on a weekly basis. He'll probably be in that top 12 range. I think, as long as he holds that role. It's just, yeah, I can't imagine the Colts are going to be playing 90 defensive snaps every week either, right? So, yeah, makes sense that it comes
It's
down.
hard to wash the stink off from how much he disappointed us last season. But there's no doubt that what we've seen thus far has been very encouraging. It was hilarious watching them against the Texans week 1. I swear Joe Mixon was like heat-seeking Cross to just like Marshawn Lynch, like run through Cross's face over and over and over. I can't tell you how many of those plays ended with Cross either holding on to Mixon and making a tackle or just getting absolutely truck-sticked and Mixon, running clear for another 10 yards. So, we'll see. Nick Cross, good player. I don't know. Good IDP asset so far, yes, because I do think even if it's not an outrageous amount of volume, I do think in terms of total defensive snaps, the Colts will be near the top of the list. And the deployment, like you said, the scheme with Gus Bradley, the deployment that we've seen, Julian Blackmon is a better deep safety than box safety, even though we saw him in that role last year. I still would rather have Nick Cross up in the box than Julian Blackmon. So I think it continues, and I am excited to see what Cross can do rest of season. Also excited to see if it may be Latu liftoff time coming with the Kwity Paye injury. He was starting to heat up, got a sack, got a forced fumble last week against Caleb Williams. What do you think, John? I've been waiting. I've got him in our main league that we're in together. I'm waiting to be able to plug him into the lineup. It feels like it's getting close.
It's definitely getting close, right? Like it might not necessarily be like this week because he was so far behind on the depth chart. It felt like just as far as how they were deploying him, just in like situational. He was below 40% every week. But Kwity Paye going down and potentially missing this game is definitely going to help his case, right? And this was one of the players that had elite pass rush metrics coming out of college. Scored really well in the edge rusher model that I had, and all signs point to him being able to hit the ground running in the NFL. He needs the snaps to do it, though, right? So there's definitely a potential for a snap increase this week. We saw the strip sack last week on Caleb Williams. That was awesome. So I think, we wait on what's happening with the Kwity Paye injury. Look at what the snaps look like this week. Doesn't have to be necessarily a must start or anything like that. It's not like the most amazing matchup because Justin Fields has surprisingly been pretty good at avoiding sacks so far this year. But yeah, I'm definitely feeling like we're getting closer to starting Latu on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm necessarily plugging him in this week. Even if Paye is out, I just want to see how the snaps shake out. You can just kind of feel when certain players are coming on and heating up and their opportunity is drawing near, this dude I think is already the best pass rusher on this Colts defensive line. DeForest Buckner is out now. If Pay is out, like kind of like Will McDonald, you kind of get thrust into this situation. Nick Herbig, same kind of thing. Like I think that opportunity was coming for Latu one way or the other, but now if Pay is set to miss any amount of time, that just opens the door even further. So not a start for week 4, but keep it on your radar.
Yep, definitely should be potentially added as a speculative add in those kind of deeper redraft leagues as well. So, yeah. Other than that, I mean, well, speaking of injuries, Kenny Moore, I don't think is going to play this week. I don't know if you have any update on that one, but it seems like he's probably questionable at best. Well, he is questionable, but Chris Lamons, I thought was his replacement. That's not somebody that I'm necessarily putting in there. It's not a great matchup either. So, yeah, if Kenny can't go, we just move on from the corners or the slot corner, at least in Indy for now. So let's talk about Cincinnati and Carolina. Where do you want to start with Cincy and Carolina?
So, what do we think happens with the Carolina offense being, I'm not going to say like a top tier offense, but definitely improved with Andy Dalton at the helm? It's a revenge game week for the Flaming Ginger Man. Yeah. And I wonder, what does that do, John, for their IDP assets, right? Because you have some interesting pieces. We saw the Josie Jewell situation, a little weird last week with Shaq Thompson being the linebacker staying on the field, Jewell coming off in certain situations. So there's not a whole lot of goodness left on this Panthers team on either side of the ball. But what kind of hope do you have if Dalton is able to make this a more competent offense? Is that a good thing for our IDPs or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing for the opposing IDPs. Like, like you said about the Anthony Richardson situation, not being able to sustain those drives. And then you see where the Colts rank in, kind of tackles allowed and stuff like that. The Panthers were, after the first 2 weeks, they were among the worst in the league in that regard too. And then Andy Dalton last week kind of brought those numbers up a little bit for them. So I definitely think it helps the opposing IDPs. I don't know how much it's going to affect necessarily their, the Panthers IDPs, other than if they are going to get a lead, for example, then, teams that they're playing against are playing from behind, so they're going to pass more, which gives maybe more some pass rush opportunity for those Carolina defensive linemen. But the only thing is, it's basically Jadeveon Clowney there. That's it. Derek Brown is out for the year, right? So there's not like a whole lot to kind of be excited about for them. Shaq Thompson's definitely somebody that is startable. But Josie Jewell, even like you said, coming off the field, that's not an ideal situation. They were been rotating Trevin Wallace in, or at least they did last week, to take away some of those Josie Jewell snaps. Nick Scott is going to be a starting safety as well. Jordan Fuller's now on IR. So there's like a lot of kind of non-brand name IDP options for this Carolina defense. So I don't know how excited we could really get about them.
This team sucks. It's the worst team in the NFL for the second year in a row. David Tepper should be embarrassed, but billionaires don't get embarrassed ever. Yeah. Trevin Wallace, maybe a late season kind of dude, because Shaq Thompson, old, Josie Jewell, old. If this team is, I think Dalton makes them more competitive, but we're still probably looking at like a 3-8 team come, late season. So I think Trevin Wallace could get some run. We're already seeing it in a situation where we wouldn't necessarily expect it to be the case. There's what's the reason to run Trevin Wallace onto the field when Josie Jewell is healthy? And then on the Bengals side, John, we had the question, I think Bobby asked it a week ago, who is your favorite IDP that you've rostered so far this season? Mine was Jermaine Pratt. Oh, yeah. What a revelation Jermaine Pratt has been this season. Always an under-the-radar, supercharged second banana. But for IDP, dude, he has been phenomenal to start the season.
Yeah, he's been excellent. He's definitely been somebody that, for redraft too, like I've ended up with a lot of Jermaine Pratt, because he's one of those guys that kind of flies under the radar, and he's essentially playing an every down role too. Like that didn't used to be the case earlier in his career. So he's moved his way up that depth chart and is basically not coming off the field. And like you said, just so productive. So really nice to see that from Jermaine Pratt. And hopefully, yeah, the Carolina offense is, again, competent enough that they can put some drives together and make some completed passes so that we can get some tackles from our linebackers, because through those first couple games, they were not very good at that. So yeah, feeling pretty good about Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson there for the Cincinnati linebackers. Other than that, I mean, the Panthers O-line has been really good. So it's not like the most amazing matchup for the Bengals, although Andy Dalton did let 2 of his 7 pressure dropbacks turn into sacks last week against Vegas. But like, that's not a lot of pressure to take in the first place, right? Thanks to that offensive line. So Trey Hendrickson, I think he's definitely, a solid start in that kind of edge 2 range again this week. I talked about him last week, even though that he's edge 18 for me. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So in that edge 2 range. Last week was his worst pass rush game of the year. Kind of lucked into a sack at the end, but just a 53.9 pass rush grade in that one. We talked about it heading into the week, how Washington's left tackle Cornelius Lucas has been pretty good, but Brandon Coleman has been bad for some reason. They rotate them. That's another one of those, coaching decisions. Why would you be rotating in this rookie Brandon Coleman when Cornelius Lucas has been so good? And yeah, it just led to a poor week for Trey Hendrickson, but ultimately think he'll be a pretty good, fine, solid asset.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Trey Hendrickson at all.
Yeah.
Just trust guys that have done it before. I mean, he's at like top 3 in sacks over the last half decade or something, Trey Hendrickson. So very underrated, very slept on.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's go to the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers now. I guess we'll start with the Vikings defensive line for me, because this is another matchup that isn't ideal for pass rushers. I know Jonathan Greenard coming off that big day just in time, really, because I think it is going to be a tougher week for them against the Packers offensive line, who have been really good this season, specifically Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, their offensive tackles, who are 2 of the highest pass blocking graded tackles in the league so far this season. Now, it kind of depends too if Malik Willis is going to be at quarterback or Jordan Love, because Malik Willis has shown a tendency to let pressures turn into sacks, but Jordan Love has been significantly better at avoiding sacks so far. So not overly excited about the Vikings pass rushers this week. Other than that, for Minnesota, I think it's a nice bounce back week for Blake Cashman. I know last week was a down week for him. Didn't help that he missed a big chunk of snaps late in the game because it was garbage time and his team was up big. So they didn't need to play him. They played against the Texans last week. So the Texans just didn't get a chance to run the ball either because they were playing from behind for so long, which never helps linebackers, where Green Bay has been the second most run heavy team in the league so far as run rate goes. So definitely going to be more opportunity for Blake Cashman this week. They've also ceded the second most tackles per game to opposing linebackers as a result of that run heavy offense. So give me all the Blake Cashman here in week 4. I got him as LB9.
I was going to say, where do you got him? Because I think Cashman's going to be cash money this week, and very excited. It's been fun to see him get his opportunity, because he was really solid for the Texans, and you understand why they go out and get an Azeez Al-Shaair with the familiarity there with the head coach D'Amico Ryans from their time in San Francisco. So I get it, but still, Cashman deserved to have his chance to helm a defense, and so it's been fun to see. And this Vikings defense, I mean, putting teams in the torture chamber week after week after week. I think Brian Flores is probably assistant coach of the year so far at this point, might be working himself back into head coaching consideration if this keeps up. If this team does well, if this defense does well. None of these Vikings edge rushers are locked and loaded auto starts. They're all very much in that fat middle that we talked about for streaming consideration. Dallas Turner, would love to see him get mixed in a little bit once he's healthy and back in the mix. But Adam has kind of preached, as the Vikings fan and as the Dallas Turner stan, be patient. This dude is super young. He's got 2 very solid entrenched starters ahead of him who are well paid. So this is an investment in your rookie drafts that's going to pay dividends in 2025 and 2026, not necessarily 2024. Yep,
makes perfect sense. And then on the Packers side of things, Rashawn Gary didn't get it done last week. I mean, everybody else on the Packers did. He did have a sack called back, which sucked because, again, everybody else on the team got one, including all the off-ball linebackers got at least a half a sack. So, just I guess down on Rashawn Gary, Minnesota offensive line. They haven't been great, but that's been mostly due to their interior offensive line, which I'll get to in a second. So he's like edge 31 for me this week. I'm not, treating him as like a must start or anything like that going forward until we see some consistency there. But speaking of the Packers defensive line, Devontae Wyatt is somebody that I like quite a bit. I have him as DT 19 this week. He's looked pretty good. Again, he had a strong second season last year, and now he's already delivered 3 sacks on the season. He's got the playing time necessary to be in consideration for IDP lineups as well, especially in those DT required leagues. So draws a nice matchup against the Vikings interior offensive line, which ranks 31st in combined pass blocking grade with a 39.8 so far this season. That's resulted in the highest pressure rate allowed at 23.3%. So Devontae Wyatt should have a good chance to kind of continue, I think, his hot streak and makes for a solid streaming option this week, especially in those DT required leagues.
Yeah, DT, if you've got 2 DT required spots, which really should be probably how we're setting up fantasy leagues if we want to mirror what the NFL is actually doing as opposed to 3 linebackers, which is how our main league is set up. Look, we all love linebackers. It's a lot of fun. But D tackles should get a lot more love. And so I feel like in those kind of leagues, if you do have 2 starting DL spots, or if you're a start 4 DL kind of like sleeper league, that he's in consideration. I know he was scooped off waivers in our main league last night. So excited for Devontae Wyatt. Rashawn Gary, I was going to ask you, because we had the debate last night on our show of, are you sitting him down until he kind of shows us something? And so your ranking of him at 31, I think you said, kind of answers that question. And yeah, I wanted to be there for Gary. For the most part throughout his career, PFF darling has not started this season well. So I think we just need to sit him and try to find a better option until he proves otherwise.
Yep. That's exactly how I'm kind of treating him. He's another one of those guys, first round picks, athletic freak, but just hasn't really kind of put it together consistently. So definitely has to come down a bit.
Kind of like Kwity Paye, honestly. First round pick. Kwity Paye was an athletic freak. Go look at the RAS. All the hope in the world for Kwity. Just has never quite put it together. Kwity is like a poor man's Rashawn Gary.
That's right. Are they both? They're both Michigan guys too, right?
Yes, they are. Something about those Michigan boys. They just don't get it done in the pros.
Yeah. Well, Hutch, Aiden Hutchinson being the
a few exceptions.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I had for Green Bay too, I just wanted to point out that Edgerrin Cooper is getting a little bit more work here. There's been talk about that coming into going into last week, I guess it was, that he might eat into McDuffie's snaps. We didn't see it in week 2, but we did see it in week 3, where he was getting on the field a lot more in obvious passing situations. So McDuffie was coming off the field. It's still not nearly enough to trust him in IDP lineups. It was only like a 33% total snap share, but it was enough to kind of bump McDuffie's snap share down. So to the point where, McDuffie, I've had to move him down the ranks as well to like LB 54 at this point, because it does seem like Cooper's maybe potentially trending up while McDuffie's trending down. On to Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. Josh, anywhere you want to start with these 2 teams?
Zach Bond.
Yeah.
What a revelation. We throw the term league winner around a lot. I think there's a couple guys on this list that we're going to talk about that are truly league winner types. Zach Bond is definitely one of them, especially from where he started his career in New Orleans, and this just sort of, blooming that we're seeing of his play at off-ball linebacker. John, is this the new version of Alex Anzalone? Both started their careers in New Orleans, found a home with their second team, and blossomed into respectable IDP assets and NFL players.
It's not a bad comparison. The thing with Bond is he's been even more efficient than Alex Anzalone. Like Anzalone's always kind of been average to below average as far as tackle efficiency goes, but Zach Bond right now, 19.4% tackle efficiency through the first 3 weeks. And again, average tackle efficiency is around 13%. So he's just been an absolute monster.
Does this keep up? It seems like is he out over his skis just a little bit? But it's just one of those things too, where every year it feels like there's a player that just kind of comes out of nowhere
Mhm.
and is just sort of this like locked and loaded stud, kind of the storyline of the season. And Bond kind of feels like that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your temperature. Does this cool off at all? Or does it seem sustainable? I mean, he's getting the playing time. Vic Fangio loves him.
Mhm.
It's just kind of hard, again, like with Nick Cross, to throw off the stink of Zach Bond. I mean, playing a handful of snaps before he got to Philadelphia in his NFL career.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? He's not been somebody that was on radars really before this offseason. And I mean, it's sustainable in that he's playing 100% of snaps. 19% tackle efficiency, probably not sustainable, right? So that'll come down. But like again, we just kind of keep rolling him out there until he gives us reason not to. Essentially, like he's LB10 for me this week. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily have to take him outside of the top 12 right now. Like even the matchup isn't amazing against Tampa Bay, but he's just been so good that he's hard to bench at this point. So I think you just ride him until we can't. And I definitely feel pretty good about him rest of the season at this point, because they obviously hate Devin White. So
They do.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we understand it, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
We get the hate, but it is weird that they haven't just cut or traded this guy yet. It seems
Yeah.
kind of mean just to make him like a healthy scratch game after game.
Yeah.
But we get a lot of questions like Zach Bond or X, and a lot of these teams are just loaded, like filthy. We're talking like, one that just happened before the Singleton injury was Singleton, Spillane, or Zach Bond. And I'm like, dear God. But the fact that that's even a consideration when you've got Singleton and Spillane as the names alongside Bond speaks to how legit this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you set this guy down. I think you just let it ride. I think he is an every week locked and loaded top 12 linebacker until proven otherwise.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Other than that, I did want to quickly touch on a couple of the defensive linemen for the Eagles, because Josh Sweat has had a quiet start to this season. He hasn't had a sack yet in all 3 games. However, he's delivered 15 pressures across those 3 games, which is more than Nick Bosa, who has 12, more than Max Crosby, who has 11, and even more than TJ Watt, who only has 8. So Josh Sweat draws a pretty great matchup to kind of finally turn those pressures into at least 1 sack this week, going up against Baker Mayfield, who has the highest pressure to sack conversion rate in the NFL through 3 weeks at the position at 36.1%. That's led to 13 sacks on the year, which is the 3rd most as well for quarterbacks. So kind of like Josh Sweat as a sneaky play this week. And I think Jalen Carter in the same kind of vein, like he dominated the Saints last week. He didn't get a sack again. It's one of those things, right? 93.9 pass rush grade, 30.4% win rate, which is insane for the position, 90.5 pass rush grade on the year. I also talked about last week how he's played way more on early downs this year than he did as a rookie, which really helps his tackle floor. So I know it's not an amazing tackle matchup for the Eagles, but pass rush wise, Jalen Carter is another guy that I think I could see finally getting off the schneid here in week 4.
Yeah, Jalen Carter, my main D tackle in our XFFL Dynasty League. I'm rolling him out every single week as my D tackle. I kind of made the case that nobody's ever going to replace Aaron Donald in the NFL or in IDP, but that clear-cut DT1 for IDP, I think is Jalen Carter's to lose right now. I'm not saying he's there yet. I just think that end of this season, beginning of next season, like it's coming. You can feel it. He was a wrecking ball against the New Orleans Saints. They stood no chance, and you could see it in the metrics you all have. When I saw that 30+% win rate, I was like, oh yeah, you could tell because my man was everywhere. That's interesting about Josh Sweat. We were debating last night with these edge rushers. What's going on here? Adam called Bryce Huff maybe the biggest bust in IDP thus far. I know you guys credit him with 2 pressures, which was nice since Next Gen Stats has him with 0. So you guys throwing your boy a little bone there, but man, that dude's not been good. I think he's droppable. Vic Fangio hates his guts. Brandon Graham is playing the most snaps. Like down is up and up is down in Philadelphia with some of these decisions that Vic's making, but it's very clear he does not like Bryce Huff.
Yeah. We gave him the 2 credits, 2 pressures to his credit, but yeah, I know he was a popular breakout candidate this year. I was kind of colder on him just because I knew early down wise, like that floor is basically zero, which is what it's been so far. He does have pass rush chops, but I mean, if he's not going to see the field, then he's useless, right? So this is, definitely a concern for Bryce Huff. Definitely not an IDP asset here, kind of going forward. On the Bucs side of things, anything really for you? I mean, maybe Antoine Winfield is back.
Yes, let's hope that DB1 from last year is back.
Yeah.
What are we doing with Levante David, John? You worried? 35 years old. The snaps are there. I think he played 98% week 1 and then 100 and 100, but 7 tackles per game, 8.6 points per game by Big 3 scoring. Age cliff comes for everyone. Are you worried at all that it may have come for Levante David? I don't think anybody's taken his job. I don't think KJ Britt or Savassier Dennis are a threat for the full-time role, but my man has not looked good.
Yeah, there's definitely some concern there, right? Like we kind of seen this with Demario Davis as an older linebacker, really, really good NFL player, but as they've gotten older, like have become very inefficient for IDP purposes. And maybe Levante David's getting there. Like I think he'll still have his games, right, where he's overproductive just because of his opportunity on the field. But it could be something to do with the defense as well. He does blitz every once in a while, but I don't mind him still, like just as like a starter in 3 linebacker leagues at this point. Like he's LB 29 for me this week. They're going up.
Yeah, he feels like an LB3 right now.
Yeah,
I think he's moved out of that. Like I always saw him like mid LB2, but I think he slid down into that like LB3 consideration.
Yeah, I think he is too. And like when I do the tackles versus expected at the end of the year, I imagine he's going to end up being somebody that's below expected on the season. Just again, being this inefficient, that's going to happen. But playing against the Eagles this week, they've given up a top 10 rate of tackles per game to the linebacker position. But yeah, worried a little bit about the tackle efficiency, 9.5% on the year there for Levante David. So that's another one of those things that might regress toward the mean. But right now, he's not necessarily like a must start by any means.
Somebody offers you a 4th round pick in 2025. You cashing out or holding Levante David?
At this point in the season, like even if I'm 0-3, like I'm not giving up on the season. So probably not.
Just hold. That's what we said too. I think that's probably his price right now is a 4th. I don't think you can get a 3rd. So if somebody came and offered me a 4th, I think I'd rather just hold Levante David and hope he turns it around. Yeah,
I think so, right? Then, maybe later in the season, when it looks like you're not going to make the playoffs or something like that, you just get what you can for him. But right now, still worth a hold.
Yep.
All right, before we go on to the afternoon slate games or the later game slates, whatever you call them, I do want to shout out LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tool to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/PFF fantasy. That's linkedin.com/PFF fantasy to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's go on to the Washington Commanders at the Arizona Cardinals. And we'll start with, I guess, the Washington IDPs who, Kyler Murray is doing a nice job avoiding sacks at this point, which has been really nice. His O-line has really helped him there as well. So I'm not looking at this as an ideal matchup for Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Dorrance Armstrong, or whoever else you're looking at there. Looking at Jeremy Chin, Arizona is giving up 14 tackles per game to safeties. That's 10th best. His usage is fine. He's just been super ineffective as well. Like 5.9% tackle rate on the year. That's trash even for defensive backs. So definitely not excited about Jeremy Chin. Mike Sanderstill was a rookie that I kind of liked. That he was playing that slot corner role. He's no longer playing that slot corner role, it seems. He moved outside last week. Not sure if he's going to hold that role going forward, but he did play 100% of snaps in that outside role while they moved Noah Igbenogany to the slot. So that's pretty much all I got for the Washington IDPs. I don't have a lot to kind of go over here. Anything for anybody that stands out to you?
I mean, Bobby Wagner, looks like a
Yeah.
giant hulking robot from Real Steel out there, just kind of lumbering around, but still getting it done for IDP, man. 10 tackles, 9 tackles, 8 tackles. Been pretty solid so far, about what we expected. I mean, just till the wheels fall off with Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, yeah, that's been nice to see, right? And the other thing that's changed too, like Dan Quinn, he ran a really man heavy defense in Dallas. Doesn't necessarily have the personnel to do that here in Washington, so it's definitely been more zone heavy than expected as well, which can help with somebody like a Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu as well. So on the Arizona side of things, again, not a whole lot of really interesting notes here. I really like Kaiser White as a top 10 linebacker this week going against Washington, who've given up the second most tackles per game to the position. Mac Wilson, also really good, but not playing a full-time role. So he's probably more of an option for deeper leagues. And then other than that, I mean, I think Buda Baker's been excellent this season. He's definitely a startable option, but the defensive line has been a pretty heavy rotation for Arizona. I don't know that anybody's really startable there. I mean, Zaven Collins has been productive, but his pass rush metrics are still really poor, where he's just kind of hard to trust, like 8.8% win rate, 56.2 pressure pass rush grade. I don't know. Any interest in the Cardinals D line for you?
I mean, that beautiful hair on Dennis Gardeck gets me aroused, but that's a whole different discussion. Dennis Gardeck has been a fun story. Zaven finding a home on the edge has been cool as well. None of these guys do I want to start. No, thank you. So you're still Kaiser White over Mac Wilson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Playing
I agree.
for sure.
I agree. Playing time looks good. It's just kind of one of those situations where, sometimes things flip. Sometimes EJ Speed overtakes Zaire Franklin as the LB1, and we don't see it coming. I'm not saying that's happening here, but Mac Wilson, I mean, props, dude, for getting in there. And he was, especially after Chris Barnes got cut, a pretty hot, deep sleeper kind of linebacker option. And so, he had a quiet week 2, got dropped, I know, in our main league and got scooped up, I think, by Adam. Curses that we let him do that. But I think Mac Wilson could be startable, especially if your league starts 36 linebackers.
Yeah, I think that's kind of his range, right? Like there's a few guys in that kind of range, so there's a lot more options, but definitely a chance, right? Like the only, I guess, the difference between Mac Wilson, Kaiser White for me versus Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed, both of the Colts linebackers basically play full-time roles, where Mac Wilson is kind of rotating off a little bit more, and depending on the matchup, he'll probably come off more or less, right? So he was 87% last week, which was really good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be around that range every week. It just depends on the opposing offense, right? So yeah, I think he'll be a little probably more volatile than Kaiser White, but he's been really good so far. So
yeah, this game's in there with Carolina Cincinnati is the least attractive IDP matchup. I mean, this is just, the Bengals at least have Hendrickson and Pratt and Logan Wilson. This one's rather grim. I mean, outside of Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Kaiser White, and Buda Baker, yeesh.
Yeah, it's not great. So let's see if we can get some more attractiveness out of this next matchup here. Your New England Patriots going up against the San Francisco 49ers.
Keon White, let's start there. It is a little easier to not hate the Patriots as much when Bill Belichick and Tom Brady are gone, the two long-standing tormentors of the Indianapolis Colts. And, Gerard Mayo seems like a pretty cool head coach, pulling off the same prank on his team 3 different times, I think in week 1 or week 2 on the sidelines. I don't know if you saw that video making the rounds. It was he was like, "Oh, watch out." And he would duck down and get people to duck. He's like, "Oh, it's just, it's kind of like stupid jock humor of thinking stuff that's funny." But he did it 3 times. So Gerard Mayo equals fun guy, which is a sentence I never thought I would say since he's the New England head coach. But let's start with Keon White. Will McDonald, I mentioned earlier, DL3, Keon White, DL4. I think Keon White is in starting consideration every week, John. He's averaging 82% of the snaps, 5.6 tackles per game, and the dude just has it. If you watch the games, he has the juice. This is a really good football player. And so I'm not saying he's an auto start. He's in that top 12 of guys, but I think he is in the mix now. a little surprisingly, because we kind of
Yeah.
wondered with Matthew Judon shipped off, and then, your boy goes on. I mean, is he on IR now with the blood clot situation, Christian
Barmore.
Barmore?
Yeah.
We wondered what was going to happen with this defensive line because there's some really interesting pieces there, and Keon White has just emerged as the leader of the pack. So, what's your thoughts on Keon White?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's definitely put himself in that conversation as kind of a locked in starter. He's been excellent. He's playing a ton as well. Like you mentioned, Will McDonald. Will McDonald, I think, was around like the 57, 58% of snaps. Keon White's up over 80% of snaps in every single game so far. I have him as edge 14 this week, and he could potentially be higher in a better matchup too, right? Like 91 pass rush grade on the year. That ranks third at the position behind only Myles Garrett and Aiden Hutchinson for players who played at least 50 pass rush snaps. So yeah, 49ers O-line, like they haven't been amazing, but Purdy's done decently well avoiding sacks. So I think just, snap volume, he'll get a chance to rack up tackles as well. San Francisco gives up the third most tackles to defensive linemen. He's just been so good, playing a ton. I love what we're seeing from Keon White.
Agreed. I think he's a guy you want to have and a guy you're probably firing up if you're in those kind of start two defensive end kind of leagues. So
makes sense. Other than that, for the Patriots, Jelani Tavai still a full-time starter. Jawan Bentley doesn't. I think he's listed as doubtful for this week, so Tavai probably going to be full-time again. Decent matchup going against 49ers, giving up the sixth most tackles to the linebacker position. Raekwon McMillan, potential like kind of desperation play. He played 73% last week, again, kind of in that Mac Wilson snap fluctuation range where that'll go up and down depending on the opponent. And 49ers spend more time in 21 personnel than any team in the league. So they also like to run quite a bit. So maybe Raekwon McMillan gets on the field a little bit more and has a nice productive game as well. And then, Kyle Duggar, he's staying as a starter for me. I know he had a shit week last week against the Jets, but in a nice spot to bounce back here against the 49ers, who give up the third most tackles to the defensive line or to the defensive backs.
Yeah,
safeties.
He is Mike Willard's number one ranked safety on the week.
Nice. Oh, me too. Oh,
there you go.
Hey,
great minds.
All right, nice. He'll be on the show in a couple weeks. Nice.
There you go.
All right, on the 49ers side of things, anywhere you want to start here?
Javon Hargrave. We were talking a little bit about the fools on Twitter who put out the look at this lack of effort from Javon Hargrave. Oh, it turns out he tore his tricep. So maybe just wait a little bit on posting clips, you attention whores out there. But not really doing much for IDP thus far. But, man, how many injuries can this 49ers team sustain before this thing just comes off the tracks? I mean, you already have CMC going to Germany for like the Kobe Bryant, procedure. And you've got Deebo Samuel out now. It's Dre Greenlaw's on the shelf probably till like Halloween or later. So, man, it's just it's a tough scene right now in San Francisco. And I know Hargrave was a guy we liked as like a bounce back, so that's over. But this San Francisco team, man, has been dinged up so far this season.
Yeah, it hasn't been a great start for them. Injury-wise, they were without Talanoa Hufanga as well. He came back last week. He was productive, but he is playing more deep. Jair Brown played 41% in the box compared to Hufanga's 28%. New England also among the more run-heavy teams in the league, so might not be ideal for chasing Talanoa Hufanga's tackles from last week, but he's not a terrible option. And then Nick Bosa, we're starting him. It's just like Micah Parsons, right?
Yeah.
Don't be stupid. Leave him in. Played all but one snap last week. Yeah. Pass rush metrics are there. New England O-line has been poor. He should see a lot of Caden Wallace this week, who owns a 47.5 pass blocking grade right now. Nick Bosa, I think he's edge 2 for me this week, so in on him still.
Yep. No brainer.
On to the Kansas City Chiefs at the Los Angeles Chargers. I will start with Kansas City quickly. There's not like a ton here, but Nick Bolton did get banged up last week, so he was in and out of the game a little bit. He's been kind of the one player on among the Kansas City linebackers that isn't getting rotated on and off the field as long as he isn't hurt, right? He's expected to be 100% snap share player, and for that reason, he carries value, right? I think I'm as LB 14 this week. It's a fine matchups. Chargers are going to be without potentially Justin Herbert. We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen there.
No way he plays, man. No way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel
re-aggravate the high ankle.
Yeah. So And they're already one of the more run heavy teams in the league, the Chargers. I imagine they're going to lean into that a lot more if Herbert's out. So that plays into Nick Bolton's potential as well. Still think he's fine. The other player that is really interesting for the Kansas City Chiefs is Chamari Connor. He's been on the field more like in passing situations. He's delivered like a number of big plays, scoring really well right now for IDP. I don't expect him to have like necessarily like a high number of snaps this week against the Chargers, who again are more of a run heavy team. They also are well below average in terms of 11 personnel as well. So I think they're 26th-ish in that range. So I'm just kind of tempering expectations for Chamari Connor to kind of keep the momentum going this week. There'll be better matchups for him against more pass heavy, more 11 personnel heavy offenses. But because of how Spags deploys his defenders, this just doesn't line up to be one of those weeks. I think, we can temper expectations for a Chamari Connor who will settle down as the season goes on. And I think it kind of starts this week.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Shout out Justin Varnes for this preseason call in this group DM we have for IDP bets. Am I the only one who likes Chamari Connor as the CB that comes from out of nowhere to be fantasy relevant? He is DB3 right now. That was my question to you. Can this guy keep it up? DB3 is a hard pace to sustain, but it's nice just to have another Kansas City DB relevant for IDP after we lose, L'Jarius Sneed to Tennessee, and he's been pretty quiet thus far this season. So it's fun to see Chamari Connor kind of step into that void created by L'Jarius Sneed's departure.
Yep, absolutely. He's going to probably end up being a more volatile asset as the season goes on. And then on the Chargers side, I mean, Joey Bosa banged up again. So
who could have seen this coming, John?
Nobody.
Almost like injury prone is a thing, and we should stop shaming people for saying so. I mean, I, for one, never would have expected this out of Joey Bosa of all people.
God. Yeah. I mean, there's certain players, right, that it definitely applies. And Joey Bosa just can't seem to shake that label, man. So Tuli Tuipulotu needs to be rostered, basically. I think he could be solid in his stead. The Chargers are just banged up. Junior Colson, if he's not active this week, I think Diane Henley could be an interesting play. So he has a chance, I think, to be like an IDP starter this week against the Chiefs, essentially, if Junior Colson isn't active. We saw it last week where he played 100% of snaps without Colson in there. If Colson's in there, I do figure they go back to that heavy rotation that is disgusting for IDP purposes, but not a bad matchup against the Chiefs this week either. Third highest tackle efficiency to opposing linebackers through 3 games this season. So that's it. Other than that, for the Chargers, justice for Derwin, and I think we move on.
I think he knows what he did was wrong, John, and I think you need to accept it.
He's just trying to make a tackle. He slipped. He didn't mean to put his head into the guy's head.
Sometimes you just have to earhole a guy with your helmet to send a message. I get it. Yeah, sometimes you just have to try to decapitate someone. We've all been. Who amongst us has not been there in that situation, John?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, we need to put ourselves in his shoes. All right, let's go to the Cleveland Browns at the Las Vegas Raiders now. Anybody you want to start with on these two teams?
Let's start with JOK, one of my most rostered players this offseason in the best ball drafts that we did. Loved how JOK finished the season. One of the hottest. I think he was the hottest linebacker, along with Ernest Jones. Christian Harris was up there, if you look at like the playoffs included. So I loved what I saw from JOK to end the season for Cleveland. So I was all in on JOK. Love to see him doing well. Got him everywhere. But I always like to play the game, John, of who's around him right now, scoring-wise. And so let's just play a little this or that rest of season for those linebackers kind of above and below JOK. Sure. You ready?
Yep.
All right, JOK or Kenneth Murray?
JOK.
JOK as well. JOK or Nick Bolton?
Bolton.
I'm going to go JOK. JOK or his teammate, Jordan Hicks?
JOK.
I think JOK as well. JOK or Devin Lloyd?
JOK.
I think JOK as well. JOK or Bobby Okereke?
Okereke.
I think Okereke. That's the one where I was like, he's below JOK right now in output, but I think I have to go with the guy who's just been there, done that, got the postcard, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, you could see from that list, I mean, JOK should be pretty high in like our rest of season rankings right now. I mean, if you were doing that kind of data set, John, is that Is he top 12, top 15? Where's JOK settling for you right now?
Yeah, rest of season's always tough because there's so many full-time linebackers. So I'd probably break it down the way I do like my draft rankings and essentially look at the defense, look at the role in the defense. And the Browns are like one of the more man-heavy defenses in the league. So that could sap his tackle production a little bit for, across an entire season. So he's definitely top 24, potentially top 20 as well. I know he gets some blitz attempts and stuff like that, but I've said it many times, big play upside, often a fallacy for IDP. So JOK, yeah, I mean he's up there for sure. It's a nice spot for him. It's close with all those guys though.
Hey, top 24, we'll take it because we weren't sure if this guy was going to be like Jordan Hicks was the guy we thought. I think Hicks is going to be great too. But yeah, JOK, yeah, just the way he finished. Now we were like, well, is he going to get the snaps? He's getting the snaps, so it's like he's checking every box.
Yeah,
and he's just an exciting player. He's a fun player to watch. So. Let's not be afraid of having fun with IDP as well.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely better. Yeah, than what we expected. I think that they're deploying him in a full-time role, which is exactly what we hoped for. Even though they had never shown that before, so this has been really promising for him. The only other Browns player I think worth touching on, Myles Garrett had a foot injury last week, so came in and out of the game. Played just 56% of snaps. But within those snaps, I don't know if you watched the game, he was dominating Andrew Thomas, who coming into that game, Andrew Thomas had posted back-to-back elite pass blocking grades, 91.4 and 85.9. Then Myles Garrett gave him a 14.7 pass blocking grade, which is insane. 93.5 pass rush grade, 46% win rate, and a 37.5% pressure rate. So
is that the highest of the week?
Pass rush grade?
Yeah, or the win rate. I mean, that is
the win rate 46%. Yeah, that's
outrageous. You're winning half of your snaps pretty much. Like, are you kidding me?
Against Andrew Thomas.
Yes, against Andrew Thomas.
Slouch, so.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So nobody panic on Myles Garrett. If he's healthy, you're playing him. There's just way too much upside there.
If he is a little dinged up with the injury, 50% of snaps, it's tough because it's like, do you have better options than even a banged up Myles Garrett? But if Myles Garrett, if we know going in, Jay Glazer gets on and says, yeah, Myles Garrett, he's going to be banged up this week, might be on a snap count. You're sitting there with Will McDonald or Keon White, some of the guys we've talked about. Sit Garrett down in favor of one of those guys or roll Garrett out there?
Yeah, I think I play him over McDonald and potentially even White. I think I'm looking at my rankings. The only player, so we'd hear something like that on a Sunday. So Micah Parsons doesn't count. He's playing Thursday. The only players I'm playing ahead of him: Aiden Hutchinson, Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Max Crosby.
But you're assuming he gets a relatively healthy snap share.
Yeah, fair, like pretty good, up over 50%. I mean, look 50%. What he did over 50% this past week.
Doesn't need much.
Doesn't need much. So yeah, that's why the upside's so high with him. So,
all right,
yeah,
good to know.
Feeling pretty good. On the Raiders side of things, Max Crosby is dealing with a high ankle sprain. Still played 83% of snaps, which is just unreal. We just talked about Myles Garrett being limited to 56% of snaps. Max Crosby just doesn't come off the field. Robert Spillane been on fire.
Let's talk about Big Bob. I mentioned league winner earlier and how hyperbolic we are, calling everyone a league winner. Every YouTube thumbnail has a league winner in it for the waiver wire pickup of the week. But when you are getting the LB2 right now at LB23 prices this offseason, this really is the kind of player that can be a league winner. When you are outperforming your draft spot by 20 plus picks, that is the kind of league winner upside. I mentioned Zach Bond earlier, another great example. Like, who are those guys that so vastly outperform their ADP that it just gives you this unreal advantage and covers up a lot of other warts on your team? I mean, Big Bob Spillane is doing it. I don't think he was one of those guys that Antonio Pierce was calling out for making business decisions. I think he was involved in some plays where guys were making business decisions from what I saw. But Big Bob Spillane, we've seen this. This is the same coaching staff that was there at the end of the season. I do not expect any changes for Big Bob Spillane. I don't worry about Diablo or Masterson cutting into his snap share at all. I think he is about as safe of a linebacker asset as you can possibly have in IDP right now.
Yeah, he's been excellent. I think he's near impossible to bench at this point. He's probably going to be a top 12 linebacker for me in the rankings every week. He's just been on fire. So, yeah, like what we've seen from him quite a bit. But other than that, Raiders defense, not all that exciting.
Man, 10 tackles, 11 tackles, 11 tackles, a sack, a pick, 14 points, 26 and a quarter, 22.35 by Big Three scoring. I mean, Big Bob, take a bow, man.
Very, very good player. Yep.
Love to see it.
Yeah. I think Adam had him as his dark horse LB1. I want to say. So
that might be
holds,
with Kingleton out, with Foye out. I mean, you got to be thinking that if you were handicapping this in Vegas, Big Bob Spillane, probably the leader in the clubhouse right now for LB1.
Yeah, it's looking nice. Looking nice for sure. All right, let's go to Sunday night football now. Oh, there's
waiting all day.
Yeah, waiting all day for Sunday night. Buffalo Bills versus the Baltimore Ravens.
Nice game too.
It's not bad. Yeah, I've been kind of happy with those ones, the Sunday night football games so far, and this one definitely shouldn't disappoint, I would hope. But yeah, looking at the matchup here, difficult pass rush matchup for the Buffalo Bills defensive line going against the Ravens. The pass blocking unit for Baltimore has been excellent. Lamar has done a great job avoiding sacks. Other than Max Crosby, I think got 2 on him, but everybody else, he's done a really nice job there. I'm still like relatively high on Gregory Rousseau, but like edge 16 high, like this week, instead of kind of pushing for that top 12, I think, playing time is great for him. Pass rush metrics are great as well. I really like what we're seeing from Greg Rousseau so far, but not necessarily this week going against the Baltimore Ravens, but still think he's kind of a difficult play to sit just because he's been so good. It's not a terrible matchup for the Buffalo linebackers, which is Balin Spector and Dorian Williams, as we all expected. The Ravens ranked 6th in run rates, 11th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. Balin Spector is the full-time guy. Dorian Williams is coming off on obvious passing downs, but Dorian Williams should get a better snap share this week than his 59% last week, just because it's the Ravens. There aren't as many passing downs, so don't mind him in deeper leagues as well. And then on the kind of flip side of that, Cam Lewis, who has been filling in for Teron Johnson as the primary slot defender. Johnson's out, so Cam Lewis has been a solid IDP asset, but I think he's one that could see fewer snaps this week, just going against the Ravens, who run like the second lowest rate of 11 personnel in the league at 33%, which is more likely to keep Cam Lewis off the field in place of like an additional pass rusher or a linebacker.
Joe Andreessen, preseason hero, John.
Oh, yeah.
Coming off of the, being activated to the game day roster this past week. Balin Spector, Dorian Williams aren't exactly world beaters.
No.
I mean, should Andreessen at least be on our radars for IDP? Or do you think Balin Spector and Dorian Williams have done enough to hold down these roles for now?
Yeah, it seems like they've done enough, right? Like just as far as looking at last week when Andreessen got in there, it was all in garbage time when that game was well over. Jacksonville was getting blown out, so the Bills put in their backups and gave Balin Spector like rest treatment. So that part of it was like at least promising to me that like, okay, you know what, they want to keep this guy healthy. They don't want to risk injuring him. They've given him the green dot as well, keeping him as a full-time player. So they at least seem high on him for now. But yeah, Andreessen definitely a name to kind of keep in mind in those really deep leagues.
Yeah, and just you never know. This Buffalo linebacker core seems to be snake bit with injuries thus far this year. So just good to have that guy on your radar just in case.
Definitely. And then on the Ravens side of things, it's also a difficult pass rush matchup for them going against the Bills O-line, which has been slightly better than Baltimore's. And then Josh Allen has been the best in the league at not letting pressures turn into sacks. So Odafe Owe, Calvin Noy, Nnamdi Madubuike specifically, not necessarily must starts this week, depending on your other options. But I think the big thing here is Trenton Simpson, clearly not a full-time player. This was one of my kind of many concerns about him coming into the year for people who were drafting him to be like Patrick Queen 2.0, just in terms of playing time. Like the Ravens aren't trusting him in passing situations after he kind of got exposed by Brock Bowers in week 2. Played just 51% of snaps in week 3 and only 31% of the third and fourth down. So it's not like the worst matchup in the world for linebackers. I do think he'll see better than 51% of snaps this week, but he's like LB 52 for me because there's so many better options out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, is breakout season for Trenton Simpson canceled, John? Were we officially taking it out behind the shed?
Yeah, it feels like it, right? Like feels like kind of his floor as far as being a starter goes, right? Like, he stays on the team next year, then, he maybe works his way into a larger role, kind of what they did with Patrick Queen, right? In his rookie year and before that, and after that, he wasn't a full-time player. So I think they just take some time to ramp him up, and maybe it's next year then.
Yeah, we may just be a year early to this party.
Yeah.
And it's a long season. Things happen. What teams do with these players can change, but thus far, not been encouraging for Trenton Simpson. I think you got to sit this guy down.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, let's go to the first of two Monday Night Football games. Again, overlapping football games on a Monday night is one of the more frustrating things.
Bring back the doubleheader. Remember the doubleheader where like Chris Berman would be calling like a 49ers game, like 49ers Broncos, and it would be ending at like 1 a.m. Central Time, and it would always just be weird games with weird things happening, and Berman just Berman just drifting in and out of consciousness, right? Like, I miss those. Like, bring back the true doubleheader, not this kind of overlapping Monday Night Football thing.
Yeah, I would take
the
that.
The only saving grace is that you typically have another game to flip to during commercials of the other one, so that is nice.
True.
But I would also rather just have football for like 8 straight hours.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I on the chance that both of these games are close and good games, then, it makes it a little bit more difficult to flip back and forth. Luckily, that wasn't the case last week, but who knows what happens this week? Tennessee, Miami. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
Let's start with Ernest plus Kenneth equals heart emoji, John, because I think both of these guys are top 24 options, top 30 options at worst moving forward. We wondered how long it would take for Ernest Jones to settle in and turn Jack Gibbons into dust. And he ganked him pretty quick. It was much faster than I think even the most optimistic Ernest Jones managers would have thought. I'm happy to see Ernest land on his feet after LA unceremoniously dumped him for Get Your Reader. One of the more baffling decisions. I get linebackers are replaceable, but man, and Reader's been fine. But when you see Ernest Jones come in, and it wasn't like he was washed, like they knew it was a Russell Wilson situation where it was like, oh no, let's dump this guy while people still think he's good. Was a little concerning. Like, okay, maybe is he bad? He got like a late round pick swap in 2026. Like, he couldn't get more than that on the trade market. Mm-hmm. But man, he's come in, looked great. I think there's not a whole lot. Harold Landry, Jeffrey Simmons, obviously to get excited about on that Tennessee defense. But man, having Kenneth Murray and Ernest Jones there now, that's a lot of fun. And I'm thankful that Ernest Jones has landed on his feet and has not been just cast aside by the NFL and by IDP managers.
Yeah, there must have been something else going on there with the Rams, because it just seems so weird. But yeah, Ernest Jones, I'm with you. Him and Kenneth Murray, they've looked great as the 100% snap linebackers in this defense. I guess my only concern for this week, I guess, is specifically for Tennessee's like back seven or whatever, is what Miami's offense is going to look like without Tua again, right? Yeah, like potentially it's not even without even Skylar Thompson.
It's not even with Skylar Thompson out. Like, legitimately, I don't know. Gun to my head, I don't know who that third quarterback is.
Yeah, it's. I'm hoping that it's Snoop Huntley.
Did they get Snoop?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So hopefully he gets out there. Yeah, that's right. I feel like that's the best bet for like Tennessee IDP production, like just as far as a competent offense to face, but. Otherwise, like it did not look very functional last week. So worried a little bit about Miami's offense, but I think it might be a nice opportunity for these pass rushers, Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, Skylar Thompson, if he does play, had a 35.3% pressure to sack conversion rate last week. That was second worst in the league, behind only Baker Mayfield. So could be potential there, but I worry a little bit about Ernest and Kenneth this week against Miami.
It's Tim Boyle. I knew it was a Boyle. I knew it was a Boyle bro. I knew we were like Brooklyn Nine-Nine territory where it was one of the Boyle bros that was going to be in there. So that is, why hasn't Miami picked up the phone yet and offered Carolina a second round pick to get Bryce Young over there? I feel like he may need a couple weeks to get up to speed. I know Tua's coming back, but we've done this song and dance with Tua for several seasons now, where the concussions are very scary and a consistent problem with him. So I just don't know why you don't have a better backup situation. like the Colts had Gardner Minshew because Anthony Richardson was both unproven and a little bit of an injury risk with the rushing upside he possessed.
Right.
Gardner Minshew leaves to go to Vegas. They go get Joe Flacco. Why do you not address this? Why are you rolling out Skylar Thompson, arguably the 63rd best quarterback in the NFL? Like,
Right.
what are we doing, Miami? You're a playoff contender. Get it together. So, yeah, I'm with you. Not a great matchup, especially if it's anyone but Pro Bowler Snoop Huntley.
Yeah, and Ian Rappaport, for what it's worth, seems to think that it'll be Snoop Huntley getting the start on Monday night. We'll see if that actually comes true or not. But on the Miami side of things, how are you feeling about Jalen Phillips? Obviously, the Achilles has kind of sapped his pass rush ability, but he did play a season high 70% of snaps last week, and this is one of the better matchups for pass rushers. So I don't necessarily trust them yet. Like, he's edged 29 for me this week purely because of the matchup, but I do think he's lost a step here because of that Achilles injury for now.
Yeah, my note here was just be patient. Remember Harold Landry last year?
Yep.
He started off slow, 2 sacks in his first 6 games. Then after a week 7 bye, exploded for 8.5 sacks down the stretch. It just takes time with injury recoveries. So be patient with Jalen. I think he'll get back to more of a closer approximation to what he was before the injury. I don't think we're ever getting pre-injury Jalen Phillips back. I just don't think it works that way with edge rushers coming off Achilles injuries. Jalen is a freak of nature athlete, so that does help. But if we can get back to 85, 90% of what Jalen Phillips was, that's a win. That's one of the better edge rushers in the league. It's not going to happen this week. It's probably not going to happen the first half of the season. It might not even happen this season, but just be patient. Just be patient.
Yep, I'm with you. Other than that, David Long is still going to be questionable for this week. It's Monday night game. It's always a little tricky. If he can't go, I think, or if you have David Long, I would be picking up Anthony Walker, who should step into a full-time role if David Long is out, and could be a fine option kind of where needed, just because of the potential for playing time there. So anything else for that game, or you want to move to the final game of the week?
Let's do the final, which should be the doubleheader game, but is the overlapping game.
Right. Yeah. So we got Seattle and Detroit as the final game here. So start with the Seattle Seahawks IDPs. Maybe Uchenna Nwosu is back this week. He didn't land on IR, right? And he's been getting the questionable tag. This is the 4th week now, which is when he'd be up on IR until. So I think he has a decent shot to return. Like, I wouldn't start him or anything like that, especially against the Lions offensive line. But for, the sake of other pass rushers on that team, specifically somebody like Derek Hall, I think he could potentially eat into those snaps if Uchenna is back. Probably doesn't affect Boye Mafe nearly as much. Mafe's been solid as well. I think I have him as edge 17. He's been a top 10 edge in IDP so far as well. So difficult matchup here overall for the pass rushers in Seattle against Jared Goff and that Lions offensive line.
Yeah, I was going to say, my Madness team needs Uchenna Nwosu back, but the Derek Hall breakout truthers like Adam don't need Uchenna Nwosu back. So it's a catch-22. Yes, Boye Mafe has been very good thus far this season. I wanted to see where he was coming in at. So he is, for us, like DL 8 or so right now. So like you said, top 10 DL. I'm not worried about Mafe if Uchenna comes back. It's Derek Hall that's going to be in a little bit of trouble. Tyrell Dodson, though, looking pretty good so far. We love when kind of these darling sleeper LB picks work out, and Dodson has been really solid thus far.
He's been great. Yeah, I really like him. I know, I think he had a quieter week last week, but I expect to bounce back this week. I got him as LB 15. The Lions giving up the 10th most tackles to the position. I'm not as interested in somebody like a Tyrese Knight if Jerome Baker can't go again, just because Knight didn't play that full-time role like Jerome Baker did when he was in there. So Seahawks just showing that he's not to be trusted in a full-time role. He played 57% of snaps, not ideal. So yeah, Tyrell Dodson is kind of the one for me in Seattle for sure.
Yep. And on the Detroit side, let's start with Aiden Hutchinson, since we mentioned him earlier as the one Michigan defensive lineman who has worked out in the pros so far. I know Kyle Bellyfield's probably like, but what about so-and-so? No, Kyle, it's just Hutch. Sorry. Adams, IDP Dynasty 101. Where is he for you right now?
I don't update my dynasty rankings in season, but he's going to be in that conversation 100%. when I do them once the season's over. I think I can't see a reason not to put him there at this point. Like, unless Micah Parsons goes on a tear, he's probably the closest. But yeah, I feel like it's got to be Hutch at this point.
He's just great situation, great pedigree. It's so nice when people live up to the billing that we've set for them. And Aiden Hutchinson, this feels like his season of ascension, where he firmly entrenches himself as a top 2, top 3 IDP asset overall, one of the best edge rushers in the league, defensive player of the year conversation. So it feels like this season might be his coronation. So yeah, I think if you've got Aiden Hutchinson, you're feeling great because you probably have the top 2 or 3 edge asset for the next half decade, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like it, right? He's definitely going to be around for a while and play at a high level for a while. Yep. So, yeah, this is definitely a nice spot for him, and just hitting the ground running too. Like, can't imagine taking Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson, but that's a different conversation.
Who would do that? What organization would do that?
And then, yeah, the only other thing for the Lions, really, I mean, Alex Anzalone's probably back this week. Was dealing with the concussion. I imagine that, he's back in the lineup this week. But Derek Barnes is on IR, so might be a nice snap bump for Jack Campbell. Probably not a full-time role. It's also not an ideal matchup going against the Seahawks, but I think Campbell could be okay in certain matchups in deeper leagues going forward. They're still going to rotate their guys quite a bit, but Jack Campbell in a nice spot at least to see an increased snap share with Derek Barnes on injured reserve.
Yeah, and then Marcus Davenport. Again, John, who could have seen this coming, that the great one, Marcus Davenport, would be on IR with another horrific injury? I, for one, did not see this coming.
Absolute hater.
Never could have predicted this based on his track record.
I know. He's another one of those guys in the Joey Bosa range. And yeah, like next man up goes, I mean, Josh Pascal maybe, but like he hasn't been great either. Like 1 total pressure on the year, I think he has. So
it's just Hutchinson. It's Hutchinson and the Hutchettes. That's really it. That's right. All they got along that defensive line.
Yep, that's it. And and Brian Branch also dealing with a concussion. We don't know if he's going to be able to get back in time, but Ifeatu Melifonwu, probably the emergency pickup if you're the Brian Branch manager, and waiting until the last minute. Also, like Quandre Diggs, Amani Hooker, some guys that are usually available, and they're also playing on Monday Night Football. Miami's been okay for safety tackles. So, yeah, other than that, I think that's going to do it for our Week 4 IDP preview. Hopefully that helps you guys get those lineups set this week. And as always, feel free to shout questions in the YouTube comments. Appreciate anybody tuning in and for the support. And if you'd be so kind to like and subscribe or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, I'd greatly appreciate that as well. And most importantly, a huge thank you to the legendary podcasting mogul himself, Mr. Josh Raymer. Can't thank you enough, sir, for coming on here and doing this with me, giving so much of your time. We didn't have time for our pop culture minute, but maybe next time.
Next time.
Yeah. So
yeah, I miss those days. Yeah, that was fun. Pop culture corner with Josh and John would have a lot to talk about. That's for sure. Pop culture, as always, is popping. Always good to do this show with you, John. Yeah, if you're in the YouTube comments, drop the questions. We're here to help. And 5-star rating and review for this guy. He's doing the Lord's work every single week. You all show him some love. It's the least we can do.
Yes, I appreciate that. And yeah, Josh, you have created a podcasting empire over there at the IDP show. So please remind everybody and let them know what you got going on so they can find you.
Yeah, every week, me, Adam, and Bobby, the IDP show, we're breaking down what happened in the week that was. And IDP, Jace Abbey, host of the IDP After Show. If you like guests, that is our guest interview feed now. No matter who you listen to, watch, read, subscribe to, they're going to be in that feed at some point, including Jon Macri. He'll be over there at some point doing that show, so check that out as well. And then IDP Bets every Friday with Johnny the Greek. This week we got Kyle Bellafield coming on to talk some of their favorite tackle and sack props. Jeff Pomazal's doing the IDP update every week on Thursday. All the headlines you need to know, 10 minutes or less. We'll probably do a trade show episode at some point. And in the offseason, IDP drafts will be back in our lives. So all sorts of podcast goodness for you folks out there. We've got you covered no matter what you're into. And theidpshow.com is the website. You can find all of our written work rankings over there. Come check it out.
Beautiful. Yes, you always do a much better job at promoting your stuff than Bobby and Adam. You got to send them with like a list or something like
I really do. It's like sending your kids to the grocery store with no list. They're just going to come back with a bunch of candy.
Yeah, exactly. As for me, IDP Fantasy Report for this past week will be linked in the episode description, which will give you access to all the waiver wire targets, snap shares, usage notes for every single IDP. Link the IDP rankings article in the episode description, as well as the link to the rankings page if that gets updated in time. It's going through some changes right now, but that's usually where I post updates closer to Sunday. We'll see if it's up in time. But anyways, I'll be back Monday morning with a quick recap, takeaways video that I'll record after Sunday night football. Those have been fun to do. Glad people have been tuning into that. But other than that, thank you all again. Big thank you to Josh. Good luck in week 4. And until next time, peace out.